Jane Eyre is one of the most unhinged and dramatic books I've ever read. The Brontes are known as the epitome of romance novels. Let's be honest, they are extremely dramatic. There are some people that are Team Emily, some people that are Team Charlotte, and then there are the forgotten ones who happen to love Anne for some strange reason. I don't know, I've never read one of her books. Probably I should, but anyway. Welcome back to another video of mine, babies. It's Paula, and in today's video I want to dive into the toxic relationship that Mr. Rochester had with Jane Eyre, the protagonist of Jane Eyre. The book by Charlotte Brontë, written in the mid-19th century. It has become one of the most acclaimed novels written by a woman ever, like in the whole existence of the human species. So yeah, it's an important book. But before entering into the depth of their relationship, I just want to say two things. One, this is not a summary of the book. I know that there are plenty of amazing, talented, brilliant, delightful videos on the internet that summarize the book, and my take is not going to be this, but rather an analysis in the relationship, because it's what I am interested in. Also, second thing, the book. Should you read it? Let's be honest, it's boring. It's a 600 and something page on the life of a girl who's orphaned and is traumatized in her aunt's house. She's physically and emotionally abused. Then she goes to a school and she's also kind of like emotionally abused there. But like lifestyle in general is not cool. She has no authority figures that are truly like caring towards her. And then she becomes 18 and she decides to go to Thornfield Hall, which is a house that is owned by Mr. Rochester, which is going to be the love interest. And that man is 40 years old. And the girl who goes to be a governess of a young girl is Jane Eyre. And Jane Eyre's 18. And it's kind of like disturbing. But that's the least of the disturbances. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the topic of today's video, which is the relationship. First of all, to get some context on the dynamic of their relationship, we can see that I was gonna say Charlotte. It's not Charlotte, it's Jane. Jane is a very kind of like insecure girl, and she's very anxious. She thinks a lot. She's very pragmatic, and it's really witty. Her humor is like top tier. It's the best humor in the world. She's so like blunt, and I love that part of her. But she's also highly, like, as I've said, insecure and has no sense of self-worth and no sense of self in general. She has never had the opportunity to develop herself. The constant question of her was, why do I have to suffer? Why me? And that's completely like normal in her circumstances. She doesn't know why she's suffering, and that's something that I believe we can all relate to. Most often than not, we suffer throughout our lives. We're gonna suffer. I suffered. I certainly have suffered, and I asked myself, why the hell me? But then I realized, like, oh, it's useless. It's useless me complaining. It's useless like the pain itself. But sometimes we will have to. That's life. Sometimes we'll have to go through suffering, and that suffering doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. It's just suffering. It's sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not, and that's life. But she doesn't have a good balance on like happiness and periods of a lot of struggle. It's always struggle for her. So she meets Mr. Rochester, and she finds him quite ugly. And she wants us to know that she finds him quite ugly. Each and every time Mr. Rochester appears, she's like, he's ugly as hell. Just my type. I mean, yes, girl, I relate. But I also believe that because she's always felt like a bird in a cage, even if she mentions in the book that she's no bird, later on the book, she contradicts herself and says that she's like a chained eagle. So yeah, she is a bird. She views herself as a bird that's been caged in her past. Now she's just chained because she has the burden of everything that has happened to her. And because she has no sense of self or belonging, she becomes the perfect prey for Mr. Rochester. And I said prey, this does not mean that the power dynamic is that big. but I just find it more like interesting and juicy for the story. They have a really weird dynamic. Let me explain. This is Jane and this is Mr. Rochester. So Mr. Rochester like gives him a bit of attention, like crumbs of attention to that woman, and she's like, this is interesting. But then he withdraws the attention and she's like, okay, I don't need you. But then she, like, in her head, she's like, fuck, why not, why not, I want him, why not? And then he then comes back a bit and she's like, yes. But when he comes back, he comes with like a lot of drama and she's like, I need to go, that's too much. And he's like, don't leave me, but you deserve better, but don't leave me, but you deserve better. And it's just this spiral of madness. It's highly toxic. It's literally the 19th dramatized version of your bestie and her ex. Literally. We get to a point where Jane is only happy when Mr. Rochester pays attention to her, which is, it is sad because it's normal to, be happy and happier when we have fulfilling relationships with other people. But if you place your whole happiness in a person, that's not gonna end very well. Jane, honey, stop it, get some help. But I know that if we get into her shoes and we see the context of the era, we realize that, hey, first of all, she was already being like a feminist of the era. She was doing things that was completely not right for women to do. She was working. That wasn't common. She didn't want to obey to social norms. That wasn't common. She didn't want to go and buy a dress and go shopping. That wasn't common. She was very self-reliant. That wasn't common. Not emotionally. Emotionally, she was 100% reliant to Mr. Rochester, and that is sickening when you read it. Before reading the book, I just did a bit of research, and everyone and their mother says that it is a romance. It is not a romance. It is a psychological thriller. And this cycle of give and take, and this give and take of attention that Mr. Rochester keeps doing to Jane is literally emotional manipulation because he's 100% aware. And now I'm going to give you a list of traits that make the perfect victim of emotional manipulation so that you can know. And you can also see how Jane was the perfect victim of manipulation. First of all, nurturers. Is Jane a nurturer? She is. Just take a look at what she does to Mr. Rochester in the end. She takes care of him even when he's sick and terrible and disgusting in every sense of the word. And in case you couldn't, grasp it, yes, I don't like that man. Champion the disadvantage. Pity people. Be a people pleaser. She's kind of one. Even if she stands up for herself and is sometimes even rude, does she trust people more than what she should? Yes, she keeps trusting Mr. Rochester even when he's like, yeah, I've lied to you 20 times today. She's like, oh my God, I love you, baby. She just took the first man she saw and was like, yeah, you're gonna be my husband. And also, she gets into different cars and when she's alone in her weird endeavors and adventures, she trusts everyone. That girl could have been killed so freaking easily. The last trait is low self-worth, which she has. She certainly has, because she has interactions with Mr. that are kind of really, they annoyed me a lot. And they are not healthy to have with a partner. You're not supposed to feel as your partner rules over you. And if your partner tells you that you are, alone and miserable, and the reason why you feel this way is because you're not married to them, run. Well, that's what she did. But don't come back. Even if he's blind and has only one hand, don't come back. He doesn't need your help. He's been stupid enough. Now I'm gonna give you a list of things that Mr. Rochester does to our protagonist. And she's still there. She still keeps loving him. It's like, girl, wake up. First of all, the whole marriage with Blanche Ingram, that girl, he basically gaslights a whole other girl and fakes wanting to get married to her just to make Jane jealous. That's gamer behavior. And not in a good sense. Also, he disguises himself as an old gypsy lady so that he can get information about how Jane feels about him. Oh, and also, he lies by omission because he never mentions that he has a freaking wife in the attic. Like the times this girl is gaslighted by this man. Like if they gave me $1 each and every time Mr. Rochester gaslights Jane, I'd be rich. Also, the victimism, that's the worst part of it, because the other, the lies and the drama, it's what makes the story like entertaining. But the victimization of that man, he's like, I don't deserve you, but don't go away because I'm gonna die if you leave me, but you don't deserve me. And it's like, dude, shut up. You're doing this to keep her addicted to you, and it's disturbing to say the least. And finally, the end, the return. Why does this woman go back to him when now she's independent? She has her own money, she has her own mental stability, and she has her thing going on. Why does she come back to Mr. Rochester? It's the same feeling you have for that situationship that happened 3 years ago. You need closure. And we all love closure. So she has a weird epiphany and goes back to Mr. Rochester. Why? What makes you think that everything's gonna be alright this time? He has already failed you like 20. It's like Carrie with Mr. Big. Seriously, it's the same. So she returns and she's like, my dear master, girl. Now he's eternally grateful because she decides to take care of him, because now he's blind and he has only one hand and he's been through a fire and he's, poor guy. Dude, karma's a relaxing thought. And now because he's extremely grateful, she submits to him even more by spending the rest of her life taking care of him. And now we could say, okay, she's independent, she has her money, but she decides to stay with him. It's her choice. We're just, hey, fantastic, do whatever you want, YOLO. But the other part of me says, hey, why? Like, what made her choose that? Is it because she was addicted to him? She needed closure, and it was like the only kind of love she had ever felt. I don't know, guys. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's certainly, I don't know, I didn't like the end. I knew they ended up together, but I don't know. I don't really like the guy. I'm happy that the protagonist ended up fulfilled, but she's always saying how she doesn't want to be a housewife and ends up being a housewife. That's weird. Also, Mr. Rochester, you try to play both roles, the victim and the master. It's not working. You're really toxic. So yeah, if you've ever encountered a Mr. Rochester in your life, or a Mr. Big, because they're literally the same person, it makes good TV, good entertainment. Just don't. Have a nice week. Why do I keep saying week? Anyway, week. Have a nice everything. Mwah.